Hello and welcome back. Time to get our first exploit on the Windows machine. And we will go first with the famous Eternal Blue exploit. It is the NSA exploit that got stolen and leaked, and that was used for the famous WannaCry ransomware attack in 2017. If you want to read more about it, you can Google it right here, and it has a very interesting story. As we can see right here, you will undoubtedly recall the names shadow brokers who back in 2017 were dumping software exploits widely believed to be stolen from the USA National Security Agency, and WannaCry, the notorious ransomware attack that struck only a few months later. You can also read some other information about the exploit, like what is Eternal Blue, and we can see its vulnerability name, CVE 2017 0.3-20148. And as it says, this is a family of critical vulnerabilities in Microsoft SMB version 1, server used in Windows 7, Windows Server 2008, Windows XP, and even Windows 10 running on port 445. You can read some other information as well if you want to. And right here it also tells us that even after 2 years of this exploit being patched, there are millions of machines on the internet that are still vulnerable to this attack. And what this exploit does basically is it exploits a mathematical error inside the SMB. And luckily, we got that exploit right here inside of our MSF console. So for now, what I got right here is the scan of my Windows 7 machine. And your scan should look similarly to mine. Now, these ports right here are not important. What is important is that you have these ports right here open. So port 445 and port 139. Also make sure that your Windows machine is up and running. And if I open my MSF console, right here, we're going to try to find that exploit and test it on our Windows 7 machine. One more thing is that besides this exploit that we have in our Metasploit framework, we also get the auxiliary module for this exploit. What does this mean? Well, it means that we can test the machine to see whether it is vulnerable before we actually exploit it. Let me show you what I mean. If I type right here search and then Eternal Blue, I will get 6 results, 2 auxiliary modules and 4 different exploits. This is the one that we're currently interested in. Exploit Windows for the SMB, and it is called MS17 Eternal Blue. But before we use it, we can use the auxiliary scanner for the SMB and for the same vulnerability, as you can compare these names right here, to see whether our target is vulnerable. So let's test this auxiliary module first. If I type right here use, and then paste the auxiliary module, clear the screen and show my options. There are a few different things that we need to set up, but the only required things is the rhosts. So let's set rhosts to be the IP address of our Windows 7 machine. In my case, it is this one. And if I type show info, so we can also read what this module does, it uses information disclosure to determine whether the Eternal Blue has been patched or not. And here it describes you how exactly does it do it. So if I triple check our options, everything seems to be set. You don't want to change these named pipes, and you also do not want to change the R port. So only thing you need to set up is this rhost right here. And let us type run. It will finish in just a few seconds, and it will tell me host is likely vulnerable to the Eternal Blue attack. It even gives us the version, Windows 7 Ultimate 7601, Service Pack 1, 64-bit. Great, our target seems to be vulnerable. Let us now perform the exploit, and you will see how easy it is. So if I search Eternal Blue once again, I copy the exploit name, which is this one, clear the screen, type use. It will by default set the payload to be Windows Reverse Interpreter Shell for the 64-bit machine. Now, since it will set this by default, you must consider changing this in case your Windows 7 machine is a 32-bit machine. If it is a 64-bit, you can simply just leave this to be Windows 64-bit meterpreter reverse TCP. If it is not, then you want to set payload to be equal to Windows/meterpreter/reverse TCP. And you will notice the only difference between this payload and this payload right here is this 64. So this just indicates that this is a 64-bit payload. Now I will not run this command because my Windows 7 machine is 64-bit. I will just type show info. And here we can see the exact definition and description of the exploit. This module is a port of the equation group Eternal Blue exploit, part of this toolkit right here, released by Shadow Brokers. There is a buffer overflow operation in this function right here. The size is calculated in this, so I'm not going to read this, of course, with mathematical error where a D word is abstracted into a word. Okay, so since our target is vulnerable, at least the auxiliary module told us, let us check out the options and let's run the exploit. So here as well we got few things that we need to set up. My payload is automatically set right here to the IP address and the port. These two we do not want to change. The R port we do not want to change, and the R hosts we need to set to the IP address of Windows 7 machine. Once everything is done, we can type run, and this will start our exploit. And in just a few seconds, I should get the meterpreter reverse shell open on the Windows 7 machine. And here it is. Down here it will print out this win, which means the exploit worked successfully. And I got my Windows 7 machine. If I type the command getuid, which stands for get user ID, it will tell me that I'm currently on that machine as the system account. And this is the highest level account on a Windows machine. Great, we successfully exploited our first vulnerability inside the Windows 7 machine. And by the way, since we haven't really covered the meterpreter yet, remember that we can run the help command, and here we can execute all of these commands that the meterpreter shell gives us. But for now, we are not going to do that. We're going to cover these commands and a bunch of other commands that we don't have here in the post-exploitation module, which is coming soon. For now, we just want to gain access to the target, and in this video, we successfully did it. But I want to show you one more thing. So don't worry, I know that you're impatiently waiting for us to actually do something on the target, but for now, the goal is to only gain access to it. If you want, you can test these commands by yourself. You can just simply type screenshot, for example, just to show you how it works. And it will take the screenshot of the target's desktop. It will save it in the /home/MrHacker. So let's check out that directory. If I lower my terminal right here and go to the /home/MrHacker, open the folder. Here is the screenshot that we took of the target's desktop. It is saved on our machine. And that is just one of the cool commands that we can do with the meterpreter shell. Others we will cover later. For now on, let me show you one more thing. If I exit out of this shell, I just want to show you if I open the second Windows 7 machine that I got right here, and there is no difference between these two machines. Just one is a 32-bit and the other one is a 64-bit machine. I just want to show you that on this one, which is the 32-bit one, the exploit will not work. Even though the auxiliary module will tell us that the machine is vulnerable. So I will just wait for this machine to open up. Matter of fact, if I remember correctly, the exploit will crash this Windows 7 machine. It will not manage to gain the meterpreter shell, but instead this Windows machine will get the blue screen of death, and then it will crash. Let's see what happens. So I will log in to this machine. I will check two things out. Once it opens up, I will check the IP address. So it is 192.168.1.13. And one more thing I will check is whether the firewall is disabled. So I'll go to Control Panel, System and Security, and then Windows Firewall. It is open, so I will just close the Windows Firewall. And now if I perform the same exploit, just change the IP address to the IP address of this new Windows 7 machine, and I try to run it, it will start the same, just after a few seconds, this machine right here should crash. It even tells us right here, host is likely vulnerable to the MS-17, which is the Eternal Blue exploit. So let's see what happens. And here it is. You can see that the Windows machine crashed, and now it is restarting. Also here we can see that the exploit failed. Remember that we got the win message once we exploited the previous Windows 7 target, but right now the exploit failed. Matter of fact, in the second attempt of it exploiting the Windows 7 machine, it crashed the machine. So this is just an example that sometimes an exploit will not work. In the first one, we managed to gain the access to the Windows 7 machine with the Meterpreter shell, but in the second one, we only managed to crash it. However, even if you manage to only crash it, this is something that you will 100% write on a report. This is a vulnerability. You should never be able to crash a target computer just like this. Imagine if this Windows 7 machine was doing something important. And just us knowing its IP address and running this exploit, we managed to crash it. That could cause a lot of problem. Now, if you really want to get this exploit to work, you can try to find a different Windows 7 ISO file and try with it to see if it might work on that one. I would also advise you that if you can, you try to install a Windows 7 64-bit version. And in the next video, we are going to see how we can perform a slightly different version of this exploit using Eternal Blue double pulsar attack. In my personal experience, this one works a little bit better than the Metasploit version of Eternal Blue. And another interesting thing is that we don't have it inside of our Metasploit framework. So what are we going to do? Well, not only are we going to run it in the next video, but I will also show you how we can add the Eternal Blue double pulsar module to the Metasploit framework by ourselves. See you in the next video.